once it does finish, but also, excuse me, also when we, as another update announcement as well. As far as the outline goes itself, everything is pretty, standard for me as far as what we're going to do top down. So I'll just briefly go, right, we'll go like project overview. I'll talk a little bit about some of the individual channels and how they're related to kind of the beginning to, I guess, A to Z portion. And then we'll do a kind of open floor Q&A. So that's just where if any of you have any questions, you're more than welcome to ask, or you can type it in the chat, just in the event if you're in a position where you cannot talk. And then we'll just do a little conclusion, right? And then just kind of talk about, what the next steps are from here and what we really are kind of waiting for. If not, maybe work that in briefly before we get to the Q&A. So to start with, let me give you guys a little bit of, I don't know if I want to say history, but a little bit of information on myself. Again, some of you do know who I am, whether you've been through projects with me before, or if maybe you just watch some of my content. Maybe you're newer to RoK and you're just joining up for the first time. If you go and you take a look at the Jump Resume channel, which is about in the middle, a little less than, more than halfway down, I guess I should say, for the RoK Jumper project section, you'll see a resume on myself, and kind of gives you a general one. Then there's one specifically to Rise of Kingdoms. There's one that's specifically to Infinity Kingdom, and then soon, wink wink, to Call of Dragons 2 as well when we end up doing our first project there. So for me, I've been playing these types of games since about 2013. Really just fell in love with kingdom builders, just the management, the idea to do things that are just beyond being a player, right? Whether that's an officer, a lead, just working with the community, working with the players on a day-to-day basis. It's almost shocking how much sometimes we socialize in these games, and even things like mental health and how important that is when you have individuals that just kind of use these games as an outlet to enjoy something beyond or aside from their day-to-day life. And so for me, I really just enjoy doing a lot of those aspects of the game. One thing that you may notice if you watch any of my content is that I don't necessarily focus as much on the kind of everyday type content that a lot of the other RoK creators will do, where it's more progression based content. Examples of that would be they will produce often content about things such as like war, PvP, where and then they'll do things like, hey, this is how you can do well in this event. Here's the top marches you should run. Here's the other accessories and items that you can run on your heroes. Commanders. I always have to make sure I'm stating the right name per game, just depending on the one I'm talking about for the day. And just how you can level your account, right? How you can min-max. That's really the majority of their content, right? My content, even though, let me say, right, I think that content is important and it is needed. In my opinion, I just don't believe that it is what I would consider to be the most important content. And that's partly also how I run my projects, right? So these are kind of loosely connected. The type of content you'll often see me put out, whether it's jumper community related, and then if you go back a little further in my RoK content before I took a little, like a mini break, if you will, you'll find that there's a lot of relevant pieces of content that talk about managing. Anything from managing an alliance to how to be a territory officer, how to do war, how to do diplomacy, how to do tech audits, etc., you name it, right? How to do migration, how to recruit. These are all really important things that if you step into the realm of management, it's just important to know. There's a guide on how to be a leader. There's a general guide on how to be an officer, right? These are pieces of content that no other content creator has really put out at this time, nor as efficiently. And again, not a slight to anyone. That's just not really the type of content that they focus on. However, I as I mentioned before, right, I think a big part of what we do as a project overall is to do things as a community and to be engaged and attentive and probably most importantly accessible, right, for myself. And so for me, looking at how can we sustain something? How can we build something that's going to have a good foundation, and then we're building successful columns, and pillars on top of that. So that way it will give our project the best chances for success, and then players that are joining the project the best day-to-day experiences that they can have as players. And I think that really applies to everyone. I think nobody wants to play somewhere that they don't like being there. They don't want to play somewhere that they're not enjoying, where they're not having fun, where they don't have people that they can talk to, right, for some and or all. And being able to create that type of atmosphere, I think, is really important. And I like to believe there's some kind of method to the madness, right? I think there's some type of successful process that we can go through to give us the highest percentage chances to achieve that. So now just kind of talking about the project overall, kind of being past myself, and for anyone that wants to go read that, I even have some videos if you want to go and watch for kingdoms that I've done projects in. We have, our announcement channel, which basically we kind of post every, week or two, every 3 weeks, just whenever we have an update there. There obviously is a questions channel for positions for anyone that's interested, right? I mean, obviously the big thing that we preach right now is that it's really just a matter of waiting to find 2 more leaders, right? We have 4 that have been vetted, that have gone through the application process. They've gone through at least 1 or 2 interviews, and, I vetted them myself. The important thing to note here, and I always do, and this is something that really just applies for every project, doesn't matter if it's mine or another, is, and I hope that for any of you that, and let me kind of loosely tie this into one of the things that we talk about in the announcement is, it is totally okay for anyone who, wants to try and go do something now. If you want to go and join a project that's starting now, doesn't mean you have to leave this project. You're more than welcome to stay and hang around. You're more than welcome to use this as a backup project for yourself, right? If and when we finally are ready. You are more than welcome to hang out. I know some players that are that are gonna participate in this project, but they just want to go and join another one just to start, just to get a little bit more knowledge and a little bit more experience right before we kick off. Again, totally fine, right? Remember, you should want to go and play where you feel comfortable playing. And I think it's also good to join as many projects as possible. I've done a video on this because it's really good to go and look at how other people, how other groups, other leaders, founders, management teams, how do they operate? How does their Discord look? What type of information are they putting out? How organized are they? Are they running meetings? Do they have, a resume channel? Are they giving you context and references for their experience, or are they maybe hiding it? Are they maybe not divulging that information? Right? Those are things that I think is that I truly believe are minimum. These are basic things that every project really should have. But oftentimes, when some players are just starting out, you may not know these things. I remember when I joined my first project, my first jumper project, that ended up going to 1196, which was one of the top 4 Imperial Kingdoms for about 2 years in the game. Right up there with 1093, which was my buddy Billy Bob OG's kingdom, for anyone who maybe remembers him back in the day. He was running Misfits, and you had like White Tigers there. I think Chisgul's Kingdom 1254 was there at the time, and then, oh god, I'm forgetting where Gecko played, unless I'm getting the numbers mixed up. But again, some of those kingdoms were top kingdoms in the game at the time. And the majority of those went off of a jumper project, and they just did, mass recruitment within those kingdoms as well. And so anyways, kind of fast forwarding, thankfully, I had a good introduction, if you will, to the game at that time by being able to play in what I considered to be a pretty organized kingdom. And so there was a lot of pros that I ended up taking away from that and just kind of building on and essentially kind of getting to where we are now. As far as the project really itself, right, at this point, right, let me just kind of talk about currently where we are, what we're waiting to get to, and kind of what we have on the agenda coming up. So, and let me preface this by saying, right, for anyone here that's newer to jumping, right, the simplistic process of jumping is just really you make a new account. You make a new account in one kingdom. You gather resources, caves, villages. You max the account out to 7. You train as many troops as humanly possible. You do a few other things here and there, and you're basically just trying to get the account as high of a level as you can, right, within that level 7 restriction. And then you wait about 7, 8, maybe 9 days at the most, and then you jump using a migration item in your inbox, or your item box, I should say, or your backpack, if you want to make a Dora Explorer the reference, and you'll end up then using that to go to a final kingdom, and that's basically where we'll call home. And then from there, right? Let me say this as well. Different projects have different goals, right? So a project with, for example, 1, 2, or 3 alliances may not adapt their goals and their expectations for what they're looking to get out of, right, going into a kingdom. They may just want to be in the mix as far as, maybe they want to have the top 2 spots on the leaderboards. Maybe they want to be within the top 4. Maybe they just want to make it to zone 3 and they don't care where they're ranked on the leaderboards. They just want to contribute. Maybe those couple alliances want to run the entire kingdom and they just want to take over everything. Maybe they want to be the top 3 and they're just going to do LT rotations or Lost Temple rotations, which is the final objective structure in Zone 3 to capture. Right? Maybe they're going into a kingdom with a few alliances so they can just take it over real quick, and then they can bring in all their buddies from older kingdoms, right? Down the road, of course, obviously, once they get to later KVKs, beyond KVK 1, where they can start bringing in minimum caps and then eventually get into SOC, and then they can, obviously kind of free willy it. So again, it does just depend on what you're doing. With a project like ours, because we have, or I should say the goal is to have 6 alliances, where we will more or less place 1 alliance in each starting zone 1. The idea isn't necessarily to enact control. It's not really to necessarily dictate anything or to go in and just, basically do like a my germs type situation, like mine. It's not like that. The hope is that by having a large enough presence, the reason why you do that, the reason why you essentially go into a kingdom with a large amount of alliances, is because you want to have you want to try and be a deterrent against any type of rogue play, any type of civil wars, or any type of unchecked or unnecessary PvP that happens in a kingdom, right? So kind of imagine us as like America / the world police for how they're viewed, except not that way, just in a more nicer way, right? And that's really a very simple way of putting it. But the objective is really to go into a kingdom, right? It kind of establish majority presence, and that can and then that will eventually transition into, and for example, doing things like alliance outreach, right? One of the things that we typically do when we go into a new kingdom is we'll have either myself and or another or 2, but essentially 1 person or a small team that will immediately start reaching out to all the alliances within a kingdom. And that's where you can start reaching out to the leaders, you start reaching out to officers, and then you start getting them into your eventual kingdom Discord, right? Or which, again, this Discord will have a kingdom section for wherever we land. And you start working on introducing yourself, you start working on building those relationships, you start working on building rapport with other players that are in those leader and management / officer positions, and you start explaining what your hopes are, right? You take time to talk to players, to talk to other leaders, and say, hey, look, this is what our hope is. We're not here to take everything, right? Our goal, for anyone here that has looked at our, I believe it's our Jump Goals channel. So an example, if you go and you look at the Jump Goals channel, you'll see the very last post there. Even though it was made a while ago, it's still relevant. I have updated these, some of these portions, but for the most part, it's still very relevant. But if you look at the Jump Goals channel, the very last post, you're going to see an overhead map. And on this map, you're going to see that each of the Zone 1 provinces are split into thirds. So that essentially means that, and you can see that for each Zone 1 province, they have dedicated structures, sites, right, altars, sanctums, that are circled. This is to designate, essentially, splitting the zones by a third, which means that you're looking at ultimately having, 18 hopeful, healthy Zone 1 alliances. And then because you have that many, or you're trying to nurture that situation, that will further bleed into your Zone 2, your Zone 3, one of the overarching ideas of a kingdom is that you want to try and have the most amount of activity and the least amount of player retention, right? Or another way to say it is attrition, right? You want to reduce that. You want to have high retention, right? Low attrition. You want as many people essentially to stay in a kingdom playing there because they like playing there, rather than leaving it or quitting or dropping off early or migrating out. And that's, of course, before you even get to a point where migration starts opening post KVK1, once you get into KVK2, KVK3, and then eventually SOC, which is Season of Conquest, in short. And by doing this, it will allow for your kingdom to stay as active and hopefully as healthy as possible. By putting in work early, where you do a lot of management outreach, it allows for you to share your vision and to share your goals with other leaders. And because you are ingratiating and humbling yourself more often than not, and some people that are here now can speak to that effect, for some here that have been in projects with me, it's one of those things where it's actually a really easy solution. It's just the fact that the majority of I don't know if I want to say majority. Let me rephrase. I don't know any other project that does that, where they'll take the time to set up dedicated channels, groups, and the moment that they're landing in a final kingdom within the first couple days, first week, they're reaching out to leaders for all the active alliances, reaching out to officers, trying to get them into the Discord, giving them set roles, and then starting to do meetings with them and have these types of really important conversations that you want to try and have as early as possible. The earlier you have these conversations, it makes it a lot easier. However, you need to know what types of conversations to have. Thankfully, because I more or less operated more of an R6 type role, which is kind of above the R5s, right? Above the leads, in more of a kind of overseer, management, supervisor type position. It makes it a lot easier for me to go and do these types of things. Why? Because I have a lot of free time. Or just, I should say, more time allotted to me. Now, I don't know for anyone here who's ever been a leader in RoK or in another Kingdom Builder game, but it does take a lot of your time. The majority of what you're really doing is managing first and foremost before playing. There's just quite a lot that goes into it. And for anyone here who's led an alliance, if you've been truly engaged in your alliance, it takes up a healthy amount of your time per day. Even for an officer, if you're an engaged and participatory officer, it will still take up a decent amount. Obviously less than what it would be for a leader, but I've seen some officers that are online just as much as leaders are in alliances. So it does just depend, and obviously how well you're doing at micromanaging, or I should say multitasking, and then for a leader, delegating, right, depending on how much assistance and support you have from your officer team. But myself being in more of an R6 role, which I guess is kind of a nice segue, is that it affords me a lot more opportunity to do things that factor more towards overall kingdom health, right? So if I'm not leading an alliance, now I have those 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day free, and I can focus those things on more member engagement, on more kingdom health, on being able to go out and do diplomacy with alliances across the entire kingdom and all of the Zone 1 provinces. Those are things that you're able to do when you create an opportunity to have an efficient single point of contact. And I'm sure some of you that have played in Kingdoms before, you may know that sometimes when you have, what's the expression, too many chefs in the kitchen, where you'll have too many people chatting with a single leader or a single officer from an alliance, and at times it can become somewhat of a debacle, right? Because it's very easy to have miscommunication when you have, one person from one of your alliances, another person from one of your alliances, and two other people from this alliance, and they're all talking with this one leader back and forth, and there's not really a lot of coordination. This is actually one of the things that leads to discrepancies and to disruptions within kingdoms and within projects when they're going in, because they usually do not have single points of contact already picked out for specific areas that can go out and have these types of kingdom-wide discussions. And it usually helps reduce a lot of that margin of error, and typically allows for you to increase what the probability will be of you being able to resolve things or to reduce the amount of overall conflict that could happen in a kingdom. Right. So kind of looking at it, and some of you might be like, damn, boss, you're really treating this like a Fortune 500 company. I mean, more or less it kind of is, right? But you just want to do it in a more simplistic way. I don't believe we have to kind of get down to the super nitty gritty, but I do believe there's a lot of crossover between if you run and you manage a successful business, between running and managing a successful kingdom. There's a lot of correlations that you can look at and say, oh, that's a trend, or oh, that's a common denominator, or oh, that's similar. And a lot of it just comes down to having someone or a team of people that are able to do those things to make everyone's day, or I should say your day-to-day experience, a lot more relieving. I think that's the one thing that when you have a lot of players in a project, and as I mentioned before, for everyone, you really want to try and create an atmosphere and a kingdom, in my opinion, where everyone loves playing there. You have a lot of people that are on your Discord. You got people that show up for meetings. You got people that show up for weekly game nights or karaoke or watch parties or whatever it may be. You do things like having fun inter-kingdom events. And you have a lot of people that show up. To me, the social aspect for what we get out of playing these types of games is far and above the most important part. Sure, everyone wants to play. Everyone wants to level their account. Everyone wants to get T5 or max T4. Everyone wants to have all their buildings maxed, all their academy maxed. They want to try and get to max VIP. You want to try and have the best gear, etc. Right? You want to max your commanders out. You want to have the best pairings that are available to you. Everyone is constantly kind of working towards these things. However, it's obviously going to take some time, depending on if you're free to play, ranging up all the way to however much you may spend. But the one thing that we can always constantly be in tune with is how much fun are you having, right? How much are you enjoying playing where you are? How much do you enjoy being where you are? That to me is always going to be the most important thing, right? How much are we taking time out of our day to educate players, to inform players, to teach players, and to show them, good practices, best practices that are going to help them progress that much faster and hopefully have that much more of an enjoyable time being here. I think it's a lot more than just us, sending mails or posting and replying to someone. It's really about, one of the things we used to do in some of my projects is we would do workshops, right? So an example of this is, like when we do our town hall meetings once a week, in the kingdoms, we'd have a small portion, maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes of the meeting that would be dedicated to having someone come in and basically run a workshop on things like, PvP pairings for a specific KVK. It would be doing things like, how can you be efficient in the open field depending on your tier? How can you contribute? What's the best academy tech order? What are some tips on gathering, some tips on AP usage for when you're out there and doing PvE, barb chaining, etc. These are things that are really important because it also factors into what I like to refer to as continued education. Right? Most of the time when you have new players that are coming into a game, they're usually going to just try and consume a lot of information quickly and try to build however much of a foundation they can. But oftentimes, once you get into the kingdom, most kingdoms, and I can tell you no kingdom I've ever been in or I've seen do this, outside of my own, respectively, is they don't do a lot of continued education, where they'll keep providing you with friendly reminders or pieces of information that will still help you, or they'll help you remind yourself, right, of something that was there, or they'll keep giving you new pieces of information to help you be efficient. Most of the time when you're in a kingdom, usually they're posting things like, whenever they're going to hit a kingdom buff, right, or if a certain rune popped up, or they'll give you the kill event fixed rankings as an example, right? Maybe they'll tell you when EOTC, Eve of the Crusade, is coming up for KVK, but there's not usually, from what I've seen, and I'm sure some kingdoms do this, right? I can only speak from my experience for the ones I've seen and or have been in, is that they typically do not focus a lot on that continued education aspect. And that's something that's just as equally important. If I'm a player and I'm getting constantly good information, and that good information is helping me progress, and it's teaching me things that I maybe didn't know before, or maybe I didn't know everything, because I now have more knowledge, I'm now more confident. And if I'm more confident, I'm going to participate more. I'm going to engage more. I'm going to fight more, etc. Anyway, so that me kind of going off on a rant because I can already see Trip staring at me intently from behind her monitor of let's keep it pushing, buddy. Let me
What?
let me move forward a bit because I know we're about 20-25 minutes in. Again, biggest thing I can really say is take time to read the jump plan, take time to read the jump goals. When you have time, there's a Final Kingdom timeline channel I have as well. And that's actually something new that I had thought of because I often get questions from players, which is, hey, what are we doing throughout the kingdom, right? What are we going to do in Zone 1? What are we going to do in Zone 2? What are we going to do in Zone 3? So this just kind of gives you an idea on, kind of project progression in somewhat of a timeline format on, how it kind of goes top down. I still have to add a little bit more, but there is a good amount that's there that can hopefully give you a little bit more of an idea. The Jump Resources channel is fantastic. I've done a lot of tinkering with this over the time. I'm sure some of you that have joined other projects, or even if you're in other projects channels, you may notice that they have 20, 10, 30, 40 channels there on resources. And in my opinion, I just don't think that you need that many. I think that if you know what to look for and you know the main primary areas to point out, you can condense all of that and arguably to one channel. And so there's a lot of good information here from talents to pairings to equipment builds to museum artifacts to events. Obviously, the new thing that I think just came out, which someone's going to have to remind me of what the name is for that they started doing, and I'm forgetting now, but I'm sure there's going to be some guides for that as well. Those would be things that we'll add. And there's a lot of good general resources here. There's jumper resources that are here. There's good managing resources that are here. And so these are just really good pieces of video content that if and when you have time to watch it, which is now, and I'm sure some of you have probably seen some of them, if not however many, those are great things to take a look at. Outside of that, really with the stage we're at now, the most important part is typically just recruiting. Right? We essentially, as I mentioned before in the beginning of the meeting, it's just waiting for 2 more leads. There is a channel for those of you that, if maybe you know someone that you think might be a good candidate. If you're considering maybe applying yourself, you can go to the Jump Positions channel and you'll see for yourself that there is a breakdown of tasks and responsibilities, some for a leader, there's some for an officer, there's an application, there's a video guide on being an officer, and there's a couple video guides on being a leader. And those I highly recommend watching and reading everything that is available for those of you that are interested in applying, or even if you think you may know someone that is interested. Those are really good to take a look at. Beyond that, like I said, that really is probably the biggest thing. Honestly, it's really just waiting until we get 2 more leads. Now, once we do get 2 more leads, then from there, we'll be able to go ahead and set a estimated date of jump. And that will be where once we pick that out, it's not going to be the next day or anything because we want to give everyone some time to prepare. We also have to do a few things such as dividing players. So we have to split players up based on those that have signed off, and we typically do that in kind of an even-Steven type way. So everyone basically is split based on region. So we'll do that first, and then we kind of fill appropriately. And the idea is that we balance out how many players are being split into each alliances based on the amount that we have. And this does a couple things. The first thing it does is that it ensures at the beginning of when you get into the Final Kingdom that you will have a higher percentage chance of having more players from your region, meaning that when you are on for peak activity, others will be on for peak activity. And this allows for you to get more helps. It allows for you to participate in any type of PvE. If you guys are going to go out and do some barb raids or chaining, etc., right? If you guys are on to participate in specific events or ABA events that come on, it gives you a higher chance of having more engagement during your peak online times. And then from there, and then the second thing is that it helps us by splitting up the players that we have signed off evenly across the alliances, right? A big part of what we do is focusing on a lot of balance between the alliances. And then which kind of segues me into one more thing, which is that, one of the things that we typically do different than other projects is we focus pretty heavily on power balancing. And this does a few big, very important things for a project. Is one, I'm sure some of you have been in kingdoms, and I'm sure some of you maybe are playing in kingdoms now, or you've been a part of some kingdoms where you've noticed this. And I'm sure some of you have done jumps or other jump projects before where you also have noticed this in the beginning, is that most of the time, well, I shouldn't say most, all of the time, when a new kingdom comes out, it is inherently already falling victim to the kind of mega alliance hierarchy structure. And what this means is that you'll notice on the leaderboards that, let me actually state this back. Let me preface this a little bit before I even say that. There is no system in the game that inherently stops or restricts or limits alliances from how much power growth they can have, right? There's nothing in the game that says, oh, well, you can't accept that player because that would push your alliance to be 100 mil more power than the number 2. There's nothing like that in the game. Everything's basically unregulated. And because of that, you have what I like to refer to as this ladder climbing effect. And what that means is that you're always going to have some players that just want to just be a part of the number 1 alliance. Doesn't matter who they are. They just want to be a part of the number 1 alliance. You'll also have some players that want to be a part of the top alliance outside of that because maybe they think, hey, there's going to be a lot of spenders here, so they're going to have a higher chance of getting more chests. There's a couple reasons, inherent ones, on why players do it and why they do what they do. But it is something that happens in every kingdom unless it's regulated, unless you have some type of outside force that's wanting to manage it in a way that's going to produce healthier results. So so that's number 1. And then getting into why we specifically do it. So if I was to ask you how encouraged you would be to participate in an event that has 4 alliances, your alliance, which is at 50 million power, and then the other 3 alliances, and then the third alliance that's at, let's say, 75 mil, the second alliance is at 100, and the number 1 alliance is at 150 million. Let's say that the number 1 alliance has won, 8 or 9 out of the last 10 AVA events. That doesn't really give your alliance nor its members a brimming amount of confidence to say, you know what, we actually have a solid chance of winning this. I'm going to go ahead and contribute more than what I need to beyond my bare minimum task rewards, right? So those of you, I'm sure you know, right, you have bare minimum task rewards that you can get in the majority of events. Most of the time, and this isn't for every player, but you will have some players that really care about events, and they even more so care about AVA events. And if they notice, which they do and they will, that your alliance is not competing for a top spot or being able to place amongst the top alliances or even being able to have a shot at winning, and they notice that consistently enough, you will get to a point where those players will slowly start to degrade. Their participation will slow down, their motivation, their morale will slow down, it'll lessen, and those are things, however small it may seem, or however important or not important it may seem to you, those are things that some players care about. And those are things that, if it happens for too long, players will leave kingdoms for things like that. The same thing with, if you have specific alliances that, don't get certain structure rotations. If there's certain alliances that are being said to be the vanguard alliances, or the ones that we're going to push every single KVK, those are things that can alienate and isolate other alliances, other members, and they will notice those things. And those are situations I can tell you firsthand will have alliances leave kingdoms, full alliances, because you are essentially saying that these people are non-factors. They are not worthy to participate. Obviously, in not so many words you're saying that. But when you have enough players in a kingdom that can read between the lines, these are really important things to take note of. And most of the time, alliances and kingdoms do not actually notice these things. Why? Because they're not approaching a kingdom from a management standpoint. They're not approaching it from, oh, well, how can I go and look at kingdom health? Maybe I should do an anonymous feedback form to get opinions and feedback from players that are playing there. Maybe I should go visit multiple alliances so I can kind of do an audit or a health check on how they're doing, right? Maybe I should be someone that's in an objective position. It's very difficult to be in an objective position because most of the time when you think about projects and kingdoms, everyone is usually a part of an alliance. And when you think about kingdom leadership, the majority of kingdom leadership, if not all the time, is typically a leader or an officer in an alliance. So even though you may try to be objective, it is somewhat difficult to do that from a visual standpoint, a public standpoint, when you have ties to a specific alliance. And that's really one of the benefits that kind of goes into the power balancing and the benefits there is that by doing that, you give this perception that players are all valuable, are just as equally able to participate and get something out of it as the next person is. Why? Because if you have all the alliances that are all very close to each other within power, it increases morale, it increases motivation, it increases member engagement, because now instead of the member thinking, oh, well, why am I going to overinvest resources beyond the minimum task rewards to participate in this event or to participate in this if I don't have a high percentage chance or even a shot, right, at getting something out of it? But if you have all the alliances that are very close in power, now that mindset shifts between, oh, wow, my alliance can compete for this number one spot. No, but my alliance can compete for this number spot. You know what? My other alliance can compete for this number one spot. And that's how you start creating a really healthy ecosystem within a kingdom. And more importantly, that's how you build a really healthy community. Beyond that, I feel like I'm just ranting at this point. Oh, gosh. Oh. So passionate. My passion bubble's exploding. What's that thing that guy says? Ramon in Happy Feet is like, I have so much love, I'm going to explode. I wish I said it with a little more Latin rasp, but that was my best impersonation. Let me see where I'm at now. I think we're looking pretty good so far for what I've walked through. Let me just take a look. Plan positions. I think I'm pretty good. On that, I guess the last thing I'll mention before I open it up to any questions, and I'm going to read for anyone that's been posting in the Jump VC chat. Again, I am reading that. I'm going to get to that here in a moment. Last thing I'm going to say just is on the recruitment portion. For those that are interested in helping to recruit, you are more than welcome to. One of the things that you can do is you can go to the Help Recruit channel, and you will see that there is a ad. I actually have to update this too as well a little bit, but it's still relevant. And then you'll see some steps at the very bottom. It'll say step 1, step 2, step 3. There's a thread channel you can click on. It's called Servers to Recruit From. When you click on this channel, it will have all of the Discord servers that you can join. And then at the end of it, there will be a piece of text that says active link or server code. An active link means that you can post the ad as is, where it has an active link to the Discord activated. Or if it says server code, you just have to remove everything besides the actual server code, which is at the end of the .gg/, and then you just post it like that. And that just kind of gives you an idea. Then really it's just a matter of, just posting the relevant channels. That's it. There's specific migration. If there's not a jumper channel, there might be a migration channel, but it's pretty straightforward. However, I am going to add a direct link to the channel in that, so I'm going to add that today, so that way you don't even have to second guess. You can join the channel and then come right back here and click on the channel that you should post in. So that way, that may help. And then, that's pretty much it, right? It's just, again, recruiting and waiting until we can, find 2 more leads. And once we do, then we'll be able to come out with a jump range. And the last thing I'll say before I now kind of get to the questions and the open floor is remember that for those of you that want, I said this in the beginning, but for those of you that want to go and join other projects, please do not feel any sense of, unwavering loyalty here, right? Again, remember, you can always join multiple projects. You can join one just to go and get experience, gain some knowledge, even if you plan to still jump with us. If you decide that you want to go and try jumping with someone else and it just really works out, that's awesome, right? Kudos to you. Keep that going, right? Because at the end of the day, there's no telling on when we're going to find 2 more leads. I could find 2 more leads tomorrow. I could find 2 more leads in a month. Unfortunately, that's one of the reasons we recruit so heavily, or I should say I recruit so heavily, is because it's just a matter of trying to find more needles in the haystack, right? So, and obviously we have a lot of good resources here on my Discord in the jump section. And so I assume and hope that a lot of projects find that helpful. I'm actually going to add another one specifically for management resources here, a dedicated channel for that, to try and kind of turn my jumper community section into a little bit more of a healthy, when I don't say healthy, not to incite that it's unhealthy, but some management resources that can help people in those ways as well. Okay, let me get to some questions here. Going top down. Now, before I get to any questions, before I start reading questions, what I'd like to do is for everyone that is here, I'm just going to go top down, right, here in the voice chat. Now, I'm just going to call on you. If you want to come on and ask something, you're more than welcome to. If you want to type something out, or if you already have something typed out, you can ping me there in the Jump VC chat. If not, I'll get to it when I do. And also remember, you do not have to feel the need. Excuse me. You do not have to feel the need to come on voice, right? If a couple seconds passes after I call your name, I'll just go on to the next person. But I like doing this because, one, if I just ask people, hey, does anyone have something they want to say, come on voice, you could have multiple people that just start talking at the same time or over each other. So doing it in this type of an organized way where we just go top down, because the way that it looks on the voice call is the same for everyone. Okay, so let me just go first. Let's go with NU the one and only. And again, this can just be for any questions, any feedback you have, only if you want to. Oh, sorry. Was that a pass? And again, you don't have to come on the mic if you don't want to either.
Yes, pass.
Okay. All right. No, thanks. Well, I appreciate you letting us know with your vocals. Let's go. Who do we have next? How about beers? All right, Pearson, no questions. Thanks for hosting. Of course, man. Thanks for tuning in. Let's go with Blitz Bolts.
Hey, yo, what's up?
Hey.
So, my biggest question is, how do you convince, especially in my KVK right now, we're going into KVK now, and a lot of people feel like they're left out, and it's causing a lot of, civil war in Home Kingdom while we're in KVK, which has caused, mayhem. So, my question is, how do you, convince everyone to form together? Because there's going to be those people that are going to try to form rebellions. There's going to be rogue players, and how do you deal with that stuff? I mean, even if you try to kick them out and banish them, they're still gonna be able to have that impact on people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For MG, we have rules of not killing farms, but there's people that would do it. And then how do you handle that without causing other people to get upset?
Well, so let me start, and I'll try not to take too much time on this because I could probably spend quite a bit. Is a lot of it starts from how you set the expectation early. What this means is that, very similar to what I was explaining before, right? Where I had mentioned when you go into a new kingdom with a project, it's very important that you start reaching out early to leads, to officers, to other members. You try and get as many people to start joining the Kingdom Discord as possible, because it allows for you to set expectations. It allows for you to set standards, and allows for you to start kind of, establishing things that can be precedents going forward. Now, obviously, I don't know too much about the kingdom you're referring to, so I don't know how much unity, right? Because that's really kind of what you're talking about, is trying to get to a point, and hopefully doing it earlier rather than later, where you can really truly unify a kingdom. And by unifying, really having everyone on the same page, to the point of where it's not just about being on the same page, it's that everyone believes in it. Everyone has faith in what you're doing. So it's not something that you ever have to really go out of your way to kind of force people to do. They just do it because they believe in it, because they love it, because they enjoy being where they are. Now, when it comes to having rogue players, for example, or those that just don't necessarily follow any rules, that's obviously a different story, right? Most of the time, kingdoms may or may not have those individuals or groups, and it won't really matter, at the end of the day, how unified a kingdom is, because it's not as though you're going to be able just to automatically assimilate those people into what your mindset is or what that kingdom's mindset is. So in those types of situations, usually the best thing to do is to educate and inform, right? So you would send, just, I would say, nicely and professionally worded and formatted mails out where you explain to the kingdom that, hey, all of these alliances are on the same page, right? There's just a few bad apples, if you will. Not to say you have to word it like that, but as a short version here, and then you would explain, right, there's a few bad apples that we've been noticing are, not necessarily following along or that believe in what this kingdom's vision is. In those situations, I think there's a few ways to do it, right? So first off, it's good to have public awareness on your side. And, it's not as though to say you need to do a, like a smear campaign or anything on them. But remember that people don't know what they don't know. And it's important to inform your kingdom of what's happening. And kind of like a weekly newsletter, right, if you will. Think of it like someone who has a magazine subscription, right? They're going to read that every week when it comes in, or someone who has a newspaper subscription. That's how they get their daily news, their international news. It's something they look forward to reading, right? That's one way that you can treat a type of kingdom mail that you send out where it lets people know what's happening, what's going on. And then from that point, it's what are you going to, physically, tangibly do to those specific types of players? And you do have a few options, right? You can alienate those players. You can encourage them to migrate out. You can offer to put passports in your shop for them to buy. You can do things, which is something I've done before, and I actually thought it worked out pretty well, right, where you kind of do like a blackout on them, basically where you have every single player in the kingdom mute them, ignore them, and then you just constantly, zero them back to back to back, right? You basically put them on an island by themselves. And it's one of those things that it's kind of a battle of attrition at that point, because it's how long is their willpower going to last versus how quickly can you crumble them psychologically. And that might sound aggressive in a way, but that's really most of the time what it comes down to for rogue players, right? It's for players that are doing that, most of the time they're usually spenders, and it's them weighing the pros and cons of, right, how long should I stay in this kingdom based on how valuable is it for me, right? Because most of the time with rogue players, they just want to go out there and, attack as many people as they can, collect resources, and that's kind of the way that they progress and they level their accounts, right? Rather than the kind of standard way where they're doing those things. When they're, gathering and participating in events and otherwise. And so, and then obviously finding other ways to potentially limit them. Sometimes if you're able to get them into a specific type of situation where, they're not allowed to join any alliances, you might be able to kind of region lock them in specific areas. And then, you can like move some of your players out of those areas when you have kill events that come around. There's actually quite a few creative ways that you can really approach those situations. It's just a matter of thinking outside the box a bit. I hope that somewhat answers the question.
Just a quick,
what
we've been noticing is that other kingdoms have been making accounts. Some of them even keep it their own name, so you'll see the same name in another kingdom that you're in KVK with, and so this has been we've seen a bunch of this happen during KVK.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a whole nother level.
Holy. That's like banishment from all four kingdoms.
It's not. I mean, it's not like hundreds of players, but you'll see like 5 or 6 players that have made accounts in your kingdom, and you're fighting in KVK, and they're just hitting your farms. And it's out there. It's definitely out there.
Yeah, so the only way that we really punish people now is we just imprison them and keep the city locked, and then we just teleport to them and zero them.
Yeah.
I mean, but even if you zero, we had one guy with 58 million power go rogue, and that was pretty tough. I mean, he ended up racking up like close to 200 million kill points.
Yeah.
Just killing farms, and they would teleport around like crazy. So like it's hard to chase those guys. So we have to put a rally on him for 8 hours, so we can follow him. But it took us like 5 to 6 hours to get them completely zeroed.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, in those types of situations, it's just, awareness is key, right? And that's why I say it's important to educate and to inform, right? More importantly, to inform your kingdom of what's happening. Because remember, if everyone is aware in your kingdom of like, let's just say it's just one player, but you're taking the time to inform people, like not only via kingdom mail, but you're also taking the time to have each of your leaders or your officers individually DM every single player in your alliances. That's the level of awareness I'm talking about. And that takes a level of commitment, it takes a level of diligence, it takes a level of effort to do those types of things, right? Because you have to think about, is everyone going to read an alliance mail in your alliance? Probably not. Is everyone going to read a king mail? Probably a little less than that. Will you have people that will read those? 100%. Will you have people that will kind of read them in a staggered way, where you might have a majority of them read them in 24 hours, but maybe you'll have others that will read them beyond that? And then you're going to have a portion of players that just don't read mails. But do you think that there's a higher percentage chance of players reading a direct message that you send them versus a mail? 1,000%, right? On average, I believe a player is going to read a direct message from someone sooner than, or more consistently than they will read an alliance mail and or a king's mail. And so being able to take advantage of all three of those avenues, right? King's mail, alliance mail, DM. That's the trifecta, right? That's the holy grail of when it comes to how you inform people of things that you think are really important. And for something like that, that's really what you would do, right? You inform everyone ahead of time. You let everyone know who the person's name is. You keep constant 8-hour rallies going on the player. And and then based on where they move, you update everyone. You can do it via world chat. You can update with regular alliance mails to keep track of. Those are things that can help players either bubble up, or if they want to move out of specific regions for that period of time and then move into other ones, right? Those are things that can tire out someone. On top of that, you have everyone mute the person. You don't engage with them. Remember, you have to put them in psychological isolation, right? And then you basically build upon that over a period of time. Remember, one of the things that I will say many players in my experience, many rogue players in my experience, one of the things that they enjoy the most is trying to get under your skin. They crave that attention, right? Because in some respects, they're looking for it, right? So they want you. They want to make you mad to where you're raging in world chat, to where you're sending them rage messages, to where you're flailing troops at them like it's going to do something, but it's not, because they just have a lot more power than someone else does. But the moment that you basically, it's like you take the oxygen out of the room, right? That's what you're doing. You're taking the oxygen out of the room and you're giving them nothing, right? You're basically treating them like they do not exist. And again, this is once you get to that point, right? We're talking once you've exhausted all the other options before, right? You've tried to talk to them one-on-one. You've tried to have someone get into a voice call with them, right? Those are things that you should always do first, right? I can tell you that in my experience, and I don't know how much Trip may have been with me for some of these, but I'm usually the type of person who, if I see someone going rogue, my first inclination is, let me reach out to them. Let me try and get in a call with them, right? Can we maybe talk about what's happening? Is it just kind of blind carnage that they just don't care and it doesn't really matter how much may come of a discussion or not? Or maybe is it because they want something? Do they want attention? Do they want to be heard? I can tell you that there's quite a few different types of rogue players, right? I have recorded conversations with rogue players across a couple different games that I've been in, where not every rogue player is going to act the exact same way. Not every person is just out for carnage. Sometimes it's because they want something out of the kingdom, or they want someone to hear them, or they want to, be able to speak to someone in leadership. That's one of the reasons why you should always take time to have a conversation with these people and try to minimize the amount of blanket backlash or name calling that they may get because they're being rogue, because that can just only kind of keep increasing the flames, right? This is pouring more gasoline on the flames at that point. And so having someone that can go out and talk to them and really ascertain, what is the threat level here? Because I can tell you, I've been in situations where I've talked to number 1, number 2 players in a kingdom that are rogue, and after spending an hour of a conversation with them, now they're no longer rogue. and now they're doing things to try to, like reparations, right? To try and help fix the situation, right? But where it's kind of us coming to an agreement and saying, well, look, something has to happen. It can't just be you rejoining an alliance and act like nothing happened. There has to be some type of consequence, some type of understanding and respect level between you and everyone else that shows you giving some good faith, you humbling yourself. And those are the types of conversations I love having. And I often find myself to be very successful in those. But you have to get the right person to do those types of things as well. Like I said, I don't know the situation in your kingdom, so I'm just kind of generally stating. But if anything, I hope it helps. Even if only one thing I said might sound helpful.
That is one of the things I've definitely learned from you and your videos and all of that, because this last jump that I did, I would find 1 out of 5 if you did you could tell who genuinely, whether there's miscommunication, they don't speak the same language that you do.
That's a big one.
Like 1 out of 5, if you talk to them or if you try to communicate with them, they can be your best players, hands down.
100%. 100%. I need to see if I have some videos, because I might have a few. I have to see. Usually I have them unlisted on my channel for other games I've played where I've had 30, 60-minute conversations with rogue players. And I'm going to be honest, some of these I wish I still had some of these recordings, because there's a few of them where I've sat down with rogue players who just absolutely hated my guts and didn't want. Yeah, I'm coming. Three. And so, and no, but seriously, I mean, I've sat down with people that literally just thought I was like the spawn of Satan. Like they just had it in their head that I was this dictator person, and it was just my way or the highway. And I shiitake mushroom you not. After I sat down with them and we just talked things out, they went from the beginning of the conversation to thinking one way about me. And then, and they had never spoken to me before. And then at the end of the conversation, they probably gave me like 20 apologies in a row, back to back to back. Like just how sorry they were and how wrong they were about me after they had an opportunity to sit down and have a conversation. And so, again, that kind of leans more into my point on, it's just, it's nice when you can approach the situation with more of a kind of Switzerland mindset, where you're not just assuming that these people have the worst intention possible. Maybe they do. But then again, maybe they don't. You wouldn't know. No one would know until you sit down and you have a conversation with them, right? And always trying to get into a voice call is always going to be the preference. And if you can't, then finding someone who can maybe sit down and have a conversation with them in text. Maybe someone that, if there's someone that doesn't speak your language, try and find someone that maybe you have someone who speaks their language, right? Try to find a native speaker. Those are things that show a level of mutual respect before you ever even start having a conversation. I have found usually one of the things we do when we go into a kingdom is we have a translator channel, and I'll ask everyone ahead of time. I'll say, hey, is there anyone here who would be willing to volunteer your time if a situation should ever arise? And you speak a different language, right? Than I usually say, speak a different language besides English. And most of the time I'll get 15, 20, 25 people that will just volunteer. And they'll say, yeah, I speak this language, boss. If you ever need something or you need me to talk to someone, just let me know. Bam, here's my info. And then we have a dedicated channel on the Discord, on the Kingdom Discord, that says, here are our translators. And here are people that you can reach out to if you have a situation come up or if you need someone. I mean, I've had situations where we've had like 10 Vietnamese players in a kingdom, or 2 Spanish-speaking or 5 Spanish-speaking players in a kingdom before. And even though it's a small group, why should those people go unnoticed, right? Why should those people go unattended? And, my view is it doesn't matter how many it is, right? We should be willing to care about everyone in a kingdom. And so, the effort you make every single day, I usually tell people, I promise, that you're gonna see those dividends pay off. You're gonna see that ROI pay off from investing into your kingdom, into those relationships. And just one of the biggest things I can say that I've learned, even from one of my recent jobs, is always attempting to apply a level of due diligence. Right? Always try to exhaust every option that there is, and before you potentially come to a conclusion, or to what you think is your last resort.
all about building respect in the kingdom. If you can introduce it, like I did it with my account. Like I kind of like focused on kingdom chat the first like couple weeks, just all out focus on kingdom chat and trying to like make those connections. So when we had this problem, we had a lot of people volunteering to go chase him around because he was pissed off, and he so basically he got removed from R4 because he was saying some racist stuff, and we just like said, well, we're not gonna deal with that. That's just not cool. So we got rid of him and told him you can have R4 back later, but for now we have to do some sort of punishment for you because what you said was not good. And he got mad, and started going crazy, and just went all out crazy. We tried talking to him. I mean, and then we even offered to buy passports, like you said, but he said no.
No.
So we just chased him and then told the top 3 alliances not to let him in. So we kicked him out of Zone 3 and 2. He was stuck in Zone 1 because after we zeroed him, his city teleported to Zone 1, and then he got removed from the alliance.
Yeah.
And we just told everybody to go to Zone 2.
Yep. Yeah.
Because then he couldn't really do anything.
Yeah, and oftentimes, if you're not really dealing with an experienced rogue player, so to speak, then sometimes you can get fortunate and those situations will arise, and then it's just a matter of waiting them out and knowing where you can find them more or less at any point in time, and then you just apply a lot of those isolation and psychological pressure techniques or tactics, and more often than not those will usually win out in the end. Because typically you'll have more people that care for the kingdom, that want to stay, versus the one person who has to keep up their same level of daily energy and effort to do what they have to do. But a big part of it is you have to inspire people. It can't be if you have members of leadership that are just freaking out and presenting themselves in somewhat of in an unstable capacity, and they do that publicly. I mean, those are the types of like worse seeds that can be planted, because what it usually will show to other people is, okay, damn, I've never seen this side of this person before, right? That can give people a little bit of air of caution. So it's not really just a matter of dealing with the rogue player, but it's a matter of also keeping yourself in check, right? And keeping members of leadership, kind of calm, cool, and collected, because the way that you present yourself to people is very important, and especially if they haven't seen certain firsts from you, and usually the ones that typically will be arguably the most questionable is how you deal with situations of crisis. How do you deal with situations that present themselves as hurdles to you, things that are not easily resolvable, things that will take time to do? It's usually where you'll start seeing a little bit of individuals' kind of true colors, and how they really can handle themselves while they're not. Ones that have experience versus don't have experience. Ones that have composure versus not composure. So yeah, those are just as equally as important. Anyways, let me move on, because I think I've already been here a little bit over an hour. I don't want to keep anyone too much longer. So let me just kind of go down the list for anyone else that may or may not have a question or comment. Let me see, who do I got next? Dragon Lair.
I think you already answered my questions. Thank you.
Oh, okay, cool. No, I'm always happy to be able to answer them passively as I'm talking about something
Yeah,
else.
yeah.
So I will take that as a win. Thanks, Dragon. Karma, what's up, man?
I'm good, bro.
All right. Awesome, thank you. How about Lil CZ, if I said that right? Oh, thank you, sir, for the ping. I appreciate you. You said, as we progress to Zone 3, shouldn't we bring players from the lower alliances to the higher alliances? So good question. One of the things that we typically do in a kingdom is we look for appropriate merging opportunities. And I said that in a mouthful on purpose. More often than not, merging is usually not the solution. It's more of the Band-Aid, depending on how you do it. I'm sure quite a few of you have been in kingdoms where you will notice, or you have noticed, and maybe you've done it yourself, where you think that the solution to your activity problem or your engagement problem or your participation problem is going to be solved from, merging two big alliances together or two medium-sized alliances together. I am here to tell you that that is backwards thinking. You should never do that as your first option, sometimes even as your second option. And one of the biggest reasons why is because unless you're able to have something lined up to replenish that alliance's activity, you're just losing a lot of shell development from that alliance. And instead, usually what you would do, kind of to what your question is, Lil CZ, is, like let's say we get into the kingdom, we're fortunate enough to fill out our 1/3 slots, alliances get on board. Over a period of time, you will have alliances, right? Remember, there's going to be more than 18 alliances created in the kingdom. Usually there's over 100, sometimes over 200, which I'm sure probably is pretty standard, amount of alliances that are created. You have thousands, tens of thousands of players that are in every kingdom. What it often comes down to is your outreach, like I was saying before. Sometimes it's not just about reaching out to all the alliances and all the officers, but sometimes it's just reaching out to as many players as possible and trying to get them into your Discord, trying to let them know what options they have, identifying alliances that are maybe slowing down in activity, that are lower on the alliance leaderboard list, and then you look to try and reach out to those ones first. Right? You should always be reaching out to smaller alliances first, and then looking to have them join up with their few players, or how many maybe small amount of active players they have, and then fill those upwards, right? So an example is, I would probably look at alliances 75 through 100 or 50 through 75 first, before I ever look at any alliances within the top 10, even the top 20. You always start farthest down and you work your way up, and you do it one by one. Right? You don't want to do it in too wide of a group. Again, you could maybe look at 80 through 100, then maybe you go 60 to 80, then maybe you go 50 to 60, then maybe you go 40 to 50, then maybe you go 35 to 40, something like that, right? Where you're reaching out to people and just letting them know, hey, you have options if you want to join a more active alliance, or, you just it's not something where you force them. You just give them the option to. You give them the information and you allow for them to make an informed decision. That is one of the best ways to really work on that, and it's typically what we do in our project. So I hope that answers the question. How about message us, or Messi? Thank you. Awesome meeting. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Let me see. Nicolina. All right. Let me go to the next one. How about Senjuru? Okay. What about Storm?
I'm all good, but thank you.
Okay. No, awesome. All right. And then last one is our fearless clamshell dude. Forgetting what the guy's name is in Finding Nemo, who is the turtle, but that's what I would have led in with. But Trip.
No questions. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the guy says something like, "It's tubular, dude." But I'm forgetting what the dad's name is in Finding Nemo for the turtle. I'm sure someone may know. Okay. That is pretty much it for me. I just want to read through real quick if there's any text, and then we can kind of conclude and close this one out. Just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. We have 138. Okay, I don't. Awesome. Okay, cool. Looks like I got to everything. So in that case, extremely happy. I think we peaked at about 15 people. So I'm actually pretty happy with that, given that's somewhat about half of the amount of people that signed up for Saturday. And then on top of that, given that the times can vary, We may try and do this again on a Saturday or Sunday, but just change the time up a little bit to see if there might be a little higher attendance. I like to try and keep these to about an hour, give or take, just depending on how many people attend and then how many questions that we have. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now, and